when this Qatar LNG plant got blown up, talk to me in a supply-demand sense what impact this has on global helium.
That actually supplies around 30% of the world's supply of helium. So the impact has been immediate.
So is helium in a way, can it be compared to tin? Like it's not substitutable, but the cost of the helium, even if it rises a lot, is not going to impact the operating cost of a NVIDIA or something.
This is general advice and my opinions only. This episode's company has paid me for this interview. I may be long, short, or hold an interest in stocks or CFDs mentioned. Past performance isn't reliable. The interviewee's views are their own, not necessarily mine. LEVRD operates as a corporate authorised representative 00131 8377 under AFSL 548573. You can find our financial services guide via the LEVRD website link in the show notes.
Righto, bag holders and stop loss owners. I said I wanted to learn about helium. I've chased down an MD, Dr. Krista Davies from Prominence Energy. Now, Krista, coincidentally, you're in a trading hold at the moment, raising money. I have put a bid into the placement, so full disclosure to the listeners. Welcome as our new resident helium expert.
Thanks, Matt. It's nice to be here.
And I only talk to PhDs, so when I'm talking high-level stuff like this, you might have to get, mate, just quick background on yourself and Prominence before we get into, I want to talk helium market, why people are talking about helium, where it comes from, what's going on, the whole global thing. So you better tell everyone who you are so you've got a bit of street cred to start with.
Sure. Well, I'm Krista Davies, so I'm a geologist by background, worked in oil and gas exploration for around 25 years, and then with all the talk about the energy transition, I became interested initially in natural hydrogen. So I started investigating natural hydrogen, and a lot of the areas and the mechanisms for the generation of natural hydrogen are coincidence with helium as well. So that's how I got interested in the hydrogen and helium space, and finished my PhD last year, and been working with Prominence on these assets in South Australia ever since.
Very good. Now, helium, I just thought it was the shit you put in balloons and you get a squeaky voice out of it. But apparently it is a non-substitutable material that has been heavily impacted by what has happened in Iran and the Qatar LNG facility. Why is helium so apparently unsubstitutable, and what the hell is it used for?
So helium is a pretty amazing gas, actually. It's got a couple of superpowers. The first is that it reacts with almost nothing. It's extremely inert, so you can throw it into data centers and space travel, and it doesn't react with any other element, generally speaking. So that's its number one superpower. The second is it can be cooled to extreme temperatures, so minus 272 degrees, which is almost at absolute zero.
That's minus 273 0 Kelvin. Yeah.
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 So it can get extremely cold without liquefying. So those are the two things that makes it extremely useful when we start talking about things like cooling in data centers, cryogenic cooling, cooling in hard drives, for example, we use it, and also in MRI machines, so those super magnets that operate in the MRI machine, the helium can actually be used in those for cooling, and also because it's so light, anything that moves, we have a reduction in friction associated with those materials when they're surrounded by helium as opposed to air. So where it's used in medical industry, in MRI machines, as I mentioned, it's also used in the generation of semiconductors. It's used in cooling for space travel. It's also used, of course, as most of us know, in party balloons.
Yeah. So in what's the use in semiconductors? That seems to be at the top of the list. how's it applied in that sense? Is it the manufacture of it or the actual use of them?
Yeah, in the manufacture of semiconductors, the helium is used for the wafer cooling of the silicon chips. So it's one of because it can be cooled so much, we can use it in those processes that require very low temperature cooling.
Yeah, rightio. So when this Qatar LNG plant got blown up and is offline for a period till it gets restored to its full capacity, why? It's LNG, but I'm assuming helium is a byproduct and it doesn't come from many places. And how much, talk to me in a supply demand sense, what impact this has on global helium?
Yeah, you're right. So the helium is extracted as a byproduct of the LNG production process. And in the Qatar plant that just had the damage to it, that actually supplies around 30% of the world's supply of helium. So the impact has been immediate, and it's an extremely important impact. We're going to see the implications of that for years to come in terms of the supply-demand curve.
Yeah, okay. So I'll refer to your presentation here. You've got the actual price of helium. Looks like there's two. Oh, could you explain? There's a red line and an orange line. Can you explain the two pricing mechanisms to refer to helium here?
Yeah. So the first, the bone coloured line there is the US A grade helium prices, and red is the Northeast Asian import prices. So the price that is paid onshore US versus what we're paying for imports from Northeast Asia, including Qatar.
Okay, so this price, the helium price, which is measured in US dollars per MCF. What's MCF?
That's 1,000 cubic feet.
1,000 cubic feet. Yeah. So that's that rise from 25 to 26. Was that attributed to the whole data center AI theme?
There's also been there's a couple of things that are influencing that. So there's the reduction in the US Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserves in the US helium were depleted and not replaced. So that has had an immediate impact. And then 25 to 26, of course, we've seen the issues in the Middle East, and that's led to an immediate increase in the helium prices due to that Qatar facility going offline.
Okay, so is helium in a way, can it be compared to tin? Like it's not substitutable, but the cost of the helium, even if it rises a lot, is not going to impact the operating cost of a NVIDIA or something like that producing chips. It's a negligible thing, but the price can actually go up a lot. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So for those industries, the supply of the helium is probably more important than the per unit price of the helium, because the amount used, as you say, for each widget is actually quite small.
Okay, righty. Okay, so if 30% comes out of Qatar, I and probably a lot of people listening to this are coming from zero base, and mate, this could be my biggest trade of all time. I'm hoping getting early on helium, but if 30% comes from Qatar, that Qatar LNG plant, where is the rest of the global helium being produced, roughly?
Roughly 46% comes from onshore US. And we've got about 9% is the world's supply is in Russia at the moment. And then there's small amounts in Algeria and Canada as well. So at the moment, we don't have any helium supply in Australia, and that's a really important point for us right now, is we're completely dependent on international imports for our helium.
Yeah, okay. And a lot of that supply, is that mostly coming from as a byproduct of LNG? I know Prominence, like the whole Gawler Craton area, looks to be more of a hydrogen helium potential area. Is most of the global stuff LNG byproduct?
Historically, 70 to 90% of the global helium has been produced as a byproduct of LNG. And so that's usually where the helium is present in very small concentrations as part of a larger hydrocarbon gas stream. And producing it as a byproduct of the LNG, it becomes concentrated in the end gases in the LNG process.
Okay, and is it pretty negligible in terms of like the amount of helium, like in terms of a revenue base for a big LNG operation? Is the amount of helium very negligible compared to the amount of natural gas and condensate and everything that they're selling?
The volumes are yes, but the value there's quite a value differential actually, because helium is so rare, it becomes economical to produce it at very small concentrations. So, for example, helium is trading the prices around at the moment over $1,000 an MCF, whereas for natural gas we might be looking at $8 to $10 an MCF. So the price differential is extreme. So you can afford to produce very small concentrations of helium from an overall gas stream.
Yeah, right. So if this graph that you had in here for 26, is that like the updated price based on what it is now post the Qatar LNG? So sitting at about 1,200 US and MCF for the Asian import. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We've seen an extremely high uptick just recently as a result of the Qatar facilities going offline.
Okay, right. I'm getting there. I'm becoming wiser by the minute here, Krista. So Australia. Let's talk Australia, then we can talk ASX companies more broadly. Has helium ever been produced as a byproduct in Australia?
Yes, so from 2010 to 2023, we had helium production in Darwin, and that was from the byproduct from the Bayu-Undan facility. Yep. And they were creating the LNG, and then the byproduct, they were taking out the highly concentrated helium stream and then processing that to create pure helium.
Okay, so like Gorgon, Wheatstone, none of them have helium as a byproduct?
None of the other producing fields at the moment have high enough helium percentages to warrant the extraction of the helium from the gas stream.
Okay,
Having said
so it's
that,
there, but it's not economic to. Oh, it might be soon.
Oh, you'd be good to see, but in some, we do see it in some other gas accumulations, but not at the levels that we saw in Bayu-Undan. Was considered to be helium rich, even though it was only around 0.1% of the gas stream in that field.
Yeah.
But the production rates were so high that it made sense to then be able to extract those low concentrations of helium from the gas stream.
Okay, rightio. That might change soon if that graph keeps going up. So what's Australia's stance on helium? Is it not it's not listed as a critical mineral or critical gas or anything? It's obviously got applications in the medical fields, as you said. What's the Australian government stance on it at the moment?
At the moment, helium's not listed as a critical mineral, although I suspect that could change in the future, because particularly the unrest in the Middle East and the Qatar plant going offline, I think that has really brought into very sharp focus our reliance on the overseas import of helium and how critical it is. It's not something that you can manufacture. Unlike hydrogen, for example, you can manufacture that very easily and relatively cheaply. But helium, you can't do that at all easily or at all cheaply. So it's really something that we need to find in the subsurface. And I think that we'll find the attention being drawn to helium more as potentially being critical for our national security to have our own supplies.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk Australian helium potentials. Like yourself, you might have to drop the names of your competitors here, Krista, if you don't mind. We're going. I've got the map up here of where your land is in the AIR project down in South Australia. You've also got the Gawler project. I see on that map there's the Ramsay project. So that's gold hydrogen. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So Gold Hydrogen have been working there on the Yorke Peninsula for a couple of years now, and they've drilled 4 wells, and they've found helium concentrations up to 36.9% air and nitrogen corrected, and up to 8% air corrected. So in helium terms, these are very high concentrations of helium, and those wells have proven the concept of helium generation in South Australia with these source rocks that we see across the Gawler Craton.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then your tenements are just to be clear, like 5 million market cap, very early stage. You're raising a buck or so today. You've obviously you spent a lot of years studying rocks. Why is this area, the Gawler Craton, the Gawler Air area down in South Australia, why is this potentially a helium area?
We are blessed in South Australia with some of the oldest rocks on Earth, particularly on the Gawler Craton. And on that map you were just showing, the pink outlines there delineate that's the known distribution of a granite called the Hyldogen granite. That's very high in uranium and thorium. And so the way that helium is generated naturally in the subsurface is through the alpha decay of the radioactive minerals, so uranium, thorium, for example. So we've got the source rocks across that area, all across the Gawler Craton. We know that we've got source rocks, and the gold hydrogen wells have proven that it is generating helium. And there's also some indications further in the north where we see helium coming to surface. So we know that those source rocks are generating helium.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm thinking about dollars. How many cap raises are involved in keeping a helium exploration company going? I'm from the world of RC and diamond drilling, looking for solid rocks and gold and copper and all that stuff. Drilling for where I'm heading into sort of oil and gas territory here. So, and it does say in your preso that talks about lower cost drilling. Like could you please explain how much does it cost to drill a well to find helium? How long does it take? How many wells do you need to drill to determine how much helium there is? Let's start down that road.
Okay, so first of all, we're onshore, so that brings the cost down immediately. And we are looking through the Gawler Craton. Most of the areas are not particularly deeply buried, not beyond a couple of kilometres. So we're also not talking about high pressure drilling. So those two things immediately bring the price of what would pay to drill a traditional oil and gas well down significantly. We are aiming to use some more innovative techniques for our drilling because we are looking specifically for helium and hydrogen gases. We know that we can't differentiate those on traditional logging tools. We can see that there's a gas, but we can't differentiate them without testing and or sampling. So our approach will be to focus first on sampling to see if the gases are there without necessarily throwing very high cost logging tools and taking the testing tools out initially. Our approach will be to do slim hole wells, to do them lean and mean. If we find something of interest, if we find some gases there, we can always come back with our higher cost rigs and our full logging sweeps and do a full evaluation once we know that we've got the gas in the ground. But for us, differentiating the gases in the ground and doing that early sampling is the most important thing for us. So we think that we can do our drilling relatively cheaply. In terms of how many wells, we've got an enormous portfolio in the Gawler Craton, and the reason for that is that we have a whole bunch of different play types. So the strategy would be to be able to drill a number, 3 to 5 wells initially, that target risk-independent plays. So we're not just drilling, having 5 cracks at the same play. We're drilling different plays to see what works. So the short answer is, and most geoscientists I think will tell you, we'll spend as much money as you want to give us, but we're trying to work smart and keep our capital costs down and get as many shots on the board through our drilling as possible.
So can you drill 5 wells for $1 million, for instance? Probably
not. That's but we're hoping to get our drilling costs for well under $1 million a well for these low-cost slim hole bores.
So, and what is the depth you're anticipating to get down to these things, and is it different to a normal oil and gas well where you got to drill it, expand it, grout it as you go down? Is it a bit different to that?
We'll be drilling relatively shallow, so between 500 metres and 1,500 metres. And so it depends on the target, of course, but some of those shallow wells, we think that we can do them with a monobore design, whereas the deeper ones, of course, we'll need at least 1 or 2 strings of casing in there. So that's what increases the cost and the time associated with the drilling. But we think that we can do it relatively cheaply and still safely.
Yeah. Okay. So, and based on all the seismic data and everything you're doing in the lead up, we're talking very thumb suck here, but just into when you're in this world of gas exploration, once you've got that data and you're hand picking individual targets, what level of confidence do you have?
Well, it's a good question.
10 or 90%? Is it not? There's a lot of info that you can get to give you a pretty good idea, or not?
Well, right now we're in the early stages, so I wouldn't like to put a number on it, but I think historically oil and gas wells generally would, an exploration well, a normal risk profile might be a 20% chance of success. But understanding that pure play helium exploration is a little bit more in the early days, let's say, in South Australia for that. So, we're on the high risk end of the spectrum, but that's why it's so important for us to approach it as a portfolio approach where we've got these risk independent options to drill to assess what play types are working. So if we stack our independent risks, then it gives us a much better chance of coming up with a successful well penetration.
Yeah. Okay. And then so that in terms of the variability of the results, you put all the work in to say, okay, we believe these are the rocks that are going to be hosting helium. Is it then if you do hit it, that you then can have variability on the upside or downside in what the flow rate and the helium concentration, partnered with the hydrogen, obviously?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're still dealing with the same issues that we would for a standard natural gas accumulation. So, how big is the trap? How good is the reservoir? Those sorts of things that will end. What's the pressure? And so, what sort of flow rates will we get? And those will all be prospect independent.
Yeah, okay. I'm understanding so much more about why oil and gas exploration is such a leverage play on the market. It can just go bananas, and you've explained that very well as to why. I haven't flirted with this field yet. if Australia was going to become a helium producer, say, like, let's assume from this area down south here, from drilling wells to being able to actually extract helium, separate it, sell it, how long does that give me just a rough timeline on if a project was going to be developed in the country?
Again, it depends where it is and how big it is. But I mean, realistically, we've got all of the technology in place to drill the wells. We've got all of the technology in place to separate the helium, the gas stream, and to condense that helium and transport it. So realistically, a 3 to 5 year timeline from drilling to have an operational plant is not unrealistic in this case.
Yeah. No, interesting. Okay, so who else? So who are the players? We've talked about yourself, Gold Hydrogen. On the ASX, we've got Blue Star Helium, D3 Energy. Any others? Like who's where? What are the exposures on the market for this? And where's everyone at? Is anyone close to producing?
So Gold Hydrogen, I know we're talking about, I think they released a couple of days ago that they're working on their a production test where they're going to re-inject water. So they've got a lot of water in their wells. So that will be interesting. They're essentially stripping gas from the water. So it'll be really interesting to watch that space.
Yep.
But for us, we're focusing on targeting free gas accumulations. That's the ideal scenario. No one else really in Australia that I could say is close to that other than this project of Gold Hydrogen's. There's Thor Energy. They have some acreage in South Australia on the Adelaide geosyncline side away from the Gawler Craton. But I think, again, it's early days of exploration for them also. In Australia, there's just not a lot going yet.
So D3 there is that Tanzania?
Yes. Now D3 also have a couple of blocks in the Akaringa Basin. So you can see on our map of the Gawler project, those northern green coloured permits there. D3 have some, those ones. So D3 has some acreage to the west of that. That they're also looking to explore for helium. Theirs is a subsalt play, and I believe they're in the early stages as well, so not at the drilling stage yet.
Yeah, here's an idea. Since you're so close to Olympic Dam, you could maybe sell them helium to help with their underground cooling. There's a commercial play for you, just a hint.
It's not such a silly idea, Matt. Of course, Olympic Dam, they need clean energy. So if we find, as we suspect, some natural hydrogen associated with the helium, then there is a potential market there for some clean energy for Olympic Dam's expansion.
Oh, there you go. So, okay, very interesting. So is hydrogen, if this is just a hydrogen helium area? Like, is there natural gas as well, or is it just hydrogen and helium?
No, so in the northern part of the area of our Gawler project, we call the Northern Hinge area, in that area there's also the potential for long-range migration of methane from the Cooper Basin side. And we know that actually is occurring because there's some springs that sit in that area, some natural springs, and they bubble gases, and those springs bubble up to 2% helium, but some of them up to 74% methane. So up in that area, we suspect that we'll have a multi-gas stream of potentially natural hydrogen, helium and methane together.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And compare this to the previous sort of hydrogen. There was the potential hydrogen was going to be the next thing. Twiggy was behind it. It's all sort of died off, but I'm just sort of picking up from how you're explaining helium. Helium's a very different case to the whole hydrogen thing. Helium doesn't look like it's got as much stuff to compete against that's existing.
Helium's very different because there is no substitute. There's nothing that you can cool as much as you can cool helium. There's nothing much that you can use that is as inert, that won't react with other materials as helium. So it really is not substitutable. Hydrogen, of course, it's an energy source. I think a lot of the hype initially was around manufactured hydrogen, and which is, of course, it's not a primary energy source. You're just translating one energy source into a more easily deliverable energy carrier. Whereas what we're looking for with natural hydrogen is that is actually a primary energy source, but the science is very early, and there are not many known discoveries yet for natural hydrogen, and certainly none that are producing commercially as yet.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so you're going to be drilling holes. Like, it's going to take a year till you probably drill your first well. Just looking at your deck, is that right?
We're aiming. Yeah, we're aiming for drilling next year. That would be our ideal. So we've got a little bit of work to do just in our prospect definition and ranking those initial prospects and leads and deciding on our drilling targets. And then there's well planning, of course, that we have to do. So all of that should lead us up to around mid next year. We hope to be getting ready to put down the vertical lie detector.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so because I'm thinking, I'm like, right, now I'm potentially a shareholder if I got an allocation. Who's the big players in this market? Like if helium went nuts, like this is all, I like thinking pie of the sky. It makes me feel happy temporarily. If a big player wants to start controlling the helium market globally, like do they exist? Is there a party that can come and say, right, we're going to start picking up ground in the Gawler Creighton to get helium exposure? Like, do these people exist?
It's not been the case so far. I think generally because helium has been so much a byproduct of natural gas production, it's not something that there's no major global controller of the helium market as such. And certainly in Australia, if we did find large amounts of helium, the most likely partners would be industrial gas suppliers like your BOC or your Air Liquide type companies. And indeed, it was BOC who had the Darwin helium plant.
Yeah, okay. So who's selling most of the helium globally to these data centres and everything? Like, who are the big suppliers of it? Do you know?
I don't know specifically. I think most of the helium market is direct contracts, so that's something that would be done directly between the supply, the field, and the off-taker.
Yeah, very good. Righto, I have learnt an absolute gutload out of that. Thanks so much, Krista. I reckon everyone else is coming from a small base as me on the world of helium. Anything else interesting that I didn't ask that you'd like to get out there about helium? Don't forget hydrogen. Poor hydrogen doesn't get a bait anymore, but we're focused on helium.
I think the important thing to remember about helium is not just that the prices have increased, but that demand is increasing. So the demand for MRI machines is expected to double in the next 10 years. The demand for data centres is expected to triple in the next 10 years. So not only do we have a supply crunch, but we've got demand projections that are saying that helium is going to become more and more important than it is now. So that's why you're starting to see a number of companies turning to focus more on direct pure play helium exploration.
Yeah, and I assume the best thing for you, besides a LNG plant getting blown up, is success in other helium companies as well to draw attention to the sector.
Indeed, yeah. Rising tide lifts all boats.
You're all mates. You're all helium mates. Very good, mate. No, thanks very much. Thanks for the 1 for 3 option as well on the cap raise. That's handy as well. I'm sure you don't like giving them away. But, mate, thank you so much for coming on LEVRD. I've had an absolute ball with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.